This is a test changing the exposure compensation. I'm up to 0.3. I'm still looking for the football. There it is. Now this is 0.7 exposure compensation. Now we are on 1.0, plus 1.0 exposure compensation. Where is the football? There it is. I'm approximately 75 feet away from the football. Plus 1.3 exposure compensation. Should have brought my tripod or my monopod with me. Plus 1.7 exposure compensation. And plus 2.0 exposure compensation. Minus 0.3 exposure compensation. Now it's much more difficult to see, but there it is. Still 75 feet away from the football. Minus 0.7 exposure compensation. Getting harder and harder for me to find the football. Yep, that is it. It's also getting harder to zoom in and out. Minus 1.0 exposure compensation. More and more difficult to see. Oh. Minus 1.3 exposure compensation. Minus 1.7 exposure compensation. Having to shade my eyes from the sun in order to see the screen now. Minus 2.0 exposure compensation. Very difficult for me to see anything here. Oh, there it is. Very difficult to see the ball there. The previous tests were all done from direct sunlight into shade. Now I'm going to repeat the same thing from shade to sunlight back into shade. This is with no exposure compensation, 0.0. I'm now standing in the shade, going through the sunlight back into the shade, and I've just now noticed that I've actually placed the football in a spot of sunlight. And there's the football. I can hold the darn camera still. This is plus 0.3 exposure compensation. This is plus 0.7 exposure compensation. Mosquitoes. Again, I'm approximately 75 feet away from the football. This is plus 1.0 exposure compensation. Plus 1.3 exposure compensation. Plus 1.7 exposure compensation. And plus 2.0 exposure compensation, or explosion compensation. And my zoom is just totally fucking up now. Oh, let's see. And you have both fingers on the two different zooms, it doesn't work very well. Now, negative 0.3 exposure compensation. Negative 0.7 exposure compensation. negative 1.0 exposure compensation. Oh. No, positive, not negative. I'm in the positive range now. Negative 1.7 exposure compensation. I believe I said negative throughout the entire positive. Not sure. I've lost my mind by now. And it looks like the football's now in the shade again. Finally, negative 2.0 exposure compensation. Oh, there's a bee on me. As you can see, the more negative you go, the darker the shade gets. My sixth and final test to see if I can see the football from shade to sunlight back into shade using the auto setting. Auto fixed range auto setting 125 to 800. There's a football in the shade under the tree in front of me. Now I'll zoom into the football to show it. There it is. Final test. Test number 4 is going from shade through the sunlight to shade again. Trying to see the football from a distance. I'm now at 1600 SOI. I'll zoom in to show exactly where the football is. Now I'll repeat the test at 3200. And then an auto setting. Test number 5, going from shade through the sunlight back into shade at the ISO setting of 3200. Trying to see the football. Now I'll zoom in on the football. One more test at the auto setting of 125 to 800. Looking for the football, now using the auto setting from 125 to 800. Testing to see if I can see this football. From direct sunlight to shade. That's my third test. Oh, that helped. It's a 1600 ISO from direct sunlight into shade. There's a football sitting in the shade there. I can barely see it with my naked eyes. Huh. Now this is 3200 SOI. There's the football right there. I'm gonna back up, see if it can be seen. Again, that's 3200 SOI.